The last thing I remembered was the scent of antiseptic and the slow, flatline beep of my own heart monitor. Then nothing. A void. So when I opened my eyes to the sight of Daniel, my husband of 5 decades, interlacing his fingers with Clara's, his first love, I thought I was in some twisted afterlife. I was wrong. I was a ghost in my own home. The day after my funeral, they held a grand wedding in our garden. The same garden where Daniel and I had planted a magnolia tree on our 40th anniversary. His face, lined with age I had once traced with affection, was full of a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. Clara, her white hair styled elegantly, looked every bit the refined intellectual she was, a stark contrast to the simple housewife I had become. If it hadn't been for Sarah using that college admission letter to threaten us all those years ago, we never would have been separated, Daniel murmured to a guest, his voice carrying on the spring breeze to where my spectral form hovered. The words were a physical blow. I had threatened them. All I had done was love him. I had given up my future for him. Then I saw her. My daughter. The child I had named Lily. The one I had dragged back from pneumonia's brink when she was 5. Spending sleepless nights by her bedside. The one I had loved with a ferocity that now felt foolish. She was clinging to Clara's arm, her face radiant. "Mom," Lily said, her voice sweet and clear. "Now we don't have to meet in secret anymore." The world, or whatever constituted my world now, tilted on its axis. Secret? My Lily? The pieces, sharp and ugly, clicked into place. The whispered phone calls, the shopping trips, that lasted just a little too long. The way Lily sometimes seemed to look at Clara with a familiarity that went beyond a family friend. It hadn't been a secret friendship. It had been a secret mother-daughter relationship. The daughter I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for was theirs. Daniel and Clara's. The child he had brought home one day, claiming she was an orphaned girl he'd found by the roadside. She was his own flesh and blood. He had looked me in the eye and lied. For 50 years. A rage, cold and absolute, surged through my non-corporeal being. It was a storm of betrayal, of wasted years, of a love that had been nothing but a convenient lie for them. The image of them, a happy reunited family on the ashes of my life, was the last thing I saw before a searing white light consumed me. I gasped, my lungs filling with air that was thick with the scent of hay and damp earth. I was on a rough-hewn wooden cot, a thin blanket tangled around my legs. Sunlight, bright and young, streamed through a window I hadn't seen in over half a century. "Sarah? You awake?" A voice called from outside. A voice I remembered. Young, vibrant, and tinged with an arrogance I had once mistaken for confidence. The door to the small shack creaked open and there he was. Daniel. Not the old man from my memories, but the 20-year-old boy I had fallen in love with. His hair was dark and thick, his face unlined, his eyes holding that same air of casual entitlement. He strode in, hands in his pockets, looking at me as if he were bestowing a great honor. "Look, Sarah," he said without preamble. "If you give your college admission letter to Clara, I'll agree to marry you." The words were a perfect echo of the past. A past that was now my present. The shock of rebirth was momentarily overshadowed by a tidal wave of déjà vu. In my first life, my heart had soared at those words. I had loved him. I'd felt sorry that he'd failed the college entrance exam and was stuck in this rural village while I had a way out. I saw it as his commitment to me, a promise of a future together. I had agreed without a second thought, handing over my ticket to a different life for a lie. Now I just stared at him. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He wasn't offering me his heart. He was bartering for Clara's future, using the one currency he thought I valued. Him. "Well?" he prompted, a slight frown creasing his brow at my silence. "It's a good deal. You know how people talk about us. We're meant to be together. This just makes it official." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I pushed myself off the cot, my young limbs feeling strange and powerful. The memories of a lifetime of servitude, of being his second choice, of raising another woman's child, fueled me. "What do you think you are?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear. He blinked, confused. "What? Do you really think," I continued, taking a step closer, "that you deserve to be compared to a college admission letter?" His jaw went slack with shock. Before he could form a response, I raised my hand and slapped him. Hard. The crack echoed in the small room, a satisfying, solid sound. He staggered back, his hand flying to his reddening cheek, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. Sarah. Are you crazy? You're the one who's crazy, I sneered, the venom of 50 years of repression in my voice. Thinking you could even be mentioned in the same breath as a college admission letter. You want me to hand my future, my hard-earned spot to Clara? Why? Because you moved your lips and tossed in a promise to marry me? How is that a fair trade? He was sputtering, his face a comical mask of indignation and confusion. You're forcing me to. If you're so capable, I cut him off, my gaze boring into his. Go take the exam yourself. Oh wait. I forgot. You already did. You failed. That's why you have the nerve to come here and ask for my letter. Isn't it? The anger faded from his face, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending bafflement. He was looking at a stranger. Are you really Sarah? Why are you talking to me like this? I let out a short, derisive laugh. The fact that I'm still talking to you at all is me being polite. But if you keep being this shameless, I've got plenty more to say. Do you want to hear it? He seemed to gather himself, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. A wrong one, but one that suited his ego. He nodded slowly. So, you got into college and your true colors are showing, is that it, Sarah? You think getting into college puts a gold edge on you? I raised an eyebrow, a gesture that felt new and powerful. Right. Getting into college doesn't make me gold-plated. But you, I paused, letting the word hang in the air, you who couldn't even get in, do you have the right to judge me? He was struck dumb again, his face flushing a deep, mortified red. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Sarah, I'll give you 2 more days to think about it. You better think carefully. I'm only giving you this one chance. If you make up your mind, come find me. Otherwise, even if you kneel and beg me to marry you later, I won't so much as look at you. The sheer, unadulterated gall of it almost made me laugh. This was the man for whom I had thrown away my life. This blind, arrogant fool. Idiot. I shot the 2 words at him, crisp and final. Then I turned around and walked away, leaving him standing there. Behind me, I heard his furious, humiliated roar. Sarah. And you call yourself a college student saying something like that? Are you even a woman? Shameless. His impotent rage was like music. But the symphony of pain he had conducted for me in my first life was one I would never forget. In this life, I would not only live well for myself, I would take back everything that was rightfully mine. And I would make them pay. I walked back to my parents' house, my steps light with a purpose I hadn't felt in decades. The village looked the same, but I was seeing it with new old eyes. When I pushed open the gate, the yard was full of people, relatives and neighbors, all crowded into our small home, their voices a cheerful cacophony. There she is. The college girl, someone shouted. My mother and father stood in the center, their faces wreathed in smiles so wide they seemed to illuminate the whole yard. When they saw me, they rushed over, pulling me into hugs, their pride a tangible, warm thing. Our Sarah. We're so proud of you, my dad boomed, clapping me on the back. The feeling was so warm, so genuine. For the first time since I'd opened my eyes in this new old world, I felt like I was home. I was their child again, not Daniel's doormat, not Lily's dupe. After the crowd left, my parents went into the kitchen together, chattering about making a special dinner to celebrate. I stood in the main room, breathing in the familiar smells of home, dried herbs, polished wood, my mother's cooking. The happiness was real, but beneath it the cold engine of my resolve was turning. I had my family. I had my future. And I had the knowledge of a snake and a viper who needed to be dealt with. By my count, Clara should already be pregnant, though not yet showing. The pieces were on the board. This time I would play the game. And I would win. The warmth of my family's celebration lingered for days, a protective bubble against the harsh realities of the past I remembered. I spent my time helping my mother with chores, the simple repetitive motions of washing vegetables and sweeping the yard grounding me in this new reality. My father would look up from his newspaper and smile at me, his eyes still shining with pride. I was determined to cherish this, to not let the poison of Daniel and Clara taint the simple joy of being my parents' daughter again. But I wasn't naive. I knew the peace was fragile. Daniel's pride had taken a severe blow. He would not let things go. Just as I expected, within the week he came looking for me again. I was in my room, already diving into the books I'd bought in preparation for university, when I heard my mother's voice call from outside. Sarah. Daniel's here to see you. I closed the book, my jaw tightening. Taking a steadying breath, I walked out into the main yard. Daniel stood by the gate, trying to look nonchalant, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. In front of my mother, he was always on his best behavior. "Auntie," he said, nodding respectfully to my mom, who was busy spreading radish slices to dry in the sun. "I just need to talk to Sarah for a moment. We can walk by the river." My mother, her hands full of white radish rounds, just smiled and waved a dismissive hand. "Of course, you young people go ahead. Don't be too long, dinner will be ready soon." Not wanting to cause a scene in front of her, I agreed. "I'll be back soon, Ma." I fell into step beside Daniel, the silence between us heavy and unnatural. We walked away from the houses, down the dirt path that led to the winding river that bordered the village. The air was fresh, filled with the sounds of crickets and flowing water. It was here in my first life that he had first held my hand. Now the place felt tainted. Once we were sufficiently isolated, with the village a quiet hum in the distance, Daniel stopped and spun around to face me. His expression was a mask of strained patience. "Sarah," he began, his tone dripping with a condescension that made my skin crawl. "I've thought about it and I won't allow you to go to college." I couldn't help it. A short, sharp laugh escaped my lips. "You won't allow me? And who are you to say what I can or cannot do?" His brows furrowed, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Why not? What's our relationship? We grew up together, childhood sweethearts. Everyone says we're a perfect pair." His voice took on a wheedling, morally blackmailing tone. "Sarah, you know I didn't get into college. For you to just leave me behind and go, don't you think that's too cruel?" I didn't respond. I simply watched him, my arms crossed, curious to see what other manipulative nonsense would spill from his mouth. It was like watching a play I had already memorized, but this time I wasn't a captive audience member. I was the critic. Seeing that his guilt trip wasn't working, he changed tactics. His face softened, his voice dropping into a coaxing, gentle register that had once made my heart flutter. Now it just sounded practiced. "Sarah, we've known each other since we were kids. I know you like me. You must. Just think about it. If you insist on leaving for college, what will happen to me? Am I supposed to just wait for you for 4 years? That's not fair to me." I looked at him, at the boy I had once loved with my whole foolish heart. I remembered the small kindnesses, sharing his lunch when I forgot mine, walking me home on stormy nights. That young boy was buried so deep under this selfish man that he was almost unreachable. I had repaid those childhood debts 1,000 times over in my first life with my silence, my sacrifices, my stolen future. Now it was time to collect on the harm he had done. I spoke, my voice cold and flat, cutting through his performance. "So, after all this talk, what you really want is for me to hand over my college spot to Clara, isn't it?" He blinked, thrown by my directness. It's for the best." "Then why doesn't she come ask me herself?" I asked, feigning a thoughtful tilt of my head. Begging someone for a favor without the sincerity to ask in person, and she still wants to go to college? She can keep dreaming. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. He'd misread my sarcasm for genuine consideration. "So what you're saying is, if Clara comes to you personally, you'll give her the spot?" I almost laughed at his desperation. I gave him a slow, appraising once-over. "Why are you so good to Claire anyway? Who is she to you?" I let my voice drip with feigned innocence. "Are you two involved with each other?" He instantly flared up, his mask of tenderness shattering. "How can you talk so crudely? Someone like you getting into college. That's what's unreasonable. Sarah, when did you become like this?" I watched the humiliation and rage war on his face. I shrugged lightly as if discussing the weather. "My answer is still the same. If Clara wants to go to college, she should come to me herself. Having you pass on the message." I let my gaze sweep over him dismissively. "She's giving you way too much credit." His jaw clenched, his face stiff with suppressed anger. He nodded sharply. "Fine. I'll have Clara come find you herself. But Sarah," he added, puffing out his chest with a final pathetic attempt at superiority, "you'd better remember this. Clara is from the city. She's not like us. Show some manners in class when you speak to her." With that, he turned on his heel and stalked off, his pride clearly wounded. I stood by the riverbank for a long time after he left, watching the water flow endlessly onward. Felt like a metaphor. My past was behind me and I was moving forward. When I got home, my mother was still in the yard. "What did Daniel want?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes were sharp. I decided it was time to bring her into my confidence. "He told me to give my college admission letter to teacher Clara." The basket of radish slices slipped from her hands, scattering white rounds across the packed earth. "What?" she stormed over, her face a thundercloud. "Has that boy lost his mind? Has the sun baked his brains? How dare he?" I quickly moved to calm her, picking up the spilled radishes. "It's okay, Ma. I handled it. But I need your help with something." I explained my plan. It was simple, but it required timing and witnesses. My mother, once she understood what was at stake, not just a college spot but my entire future, agreed without hesitation. Her maternal instincts, now fully awakened to the threat against her daughter, were a formidable force. The next morning, just as the sun was burning off the dawn mist, my mother, who had been keeping a vigilant watch, called out to me from the doorway. "Sarah, Teacher Clara is here." I walked out to see Clara standing at our gate, looking uncomfortable and out of place in her neat city clothes. She was pretty, I had to admit, with a delicate features and an air of cultivated elegance that set her apart from the village girls. My mother put on a brilliant smile. "Oh, Teacher Clara. What a surprise. Please come in. Sarah, entertain our guest. I just remembered I have to help Auntie Wong with something. I'll be right back." She gave me a significant look and hurried away, following the script perfectly. I stood in the doorway, blocking Clara from entering. I waited until my mother was a safe distance away before I spoke. "What did you come here for?" Clara looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Sarah, I heard from Daniel." I curved my lips into a slow, knowing smile. "What's wrong?" Finding it hard to ask. "Seems you also know that begging someone for their college admission letter isn't exactly a decent thing to do." Her face flushed a bright, mortified crimson. But just as quickly, that ingrained city arrogance crept back into her expression. She straightened her spine. "I'm doing this for your own good, Sarah. Everyone says you and Daniel are a pair. I know you two grew up together. Your relationship is strong. You and Daniel both took the exam. You got in, but he didn't. Are you really going to leave him behind and go off to college alone? How do you expect Daniel to feel? How do you think everyone will see you?" I crossed my arms, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Go on then. What would everyone think of me?" Her voice became deadly serious, as if she were imparting a great wisdom. "Everyone would say you're heartless. That for the sake of college you abandoned your man. Sarah, you'd better think this through. A woman that cold and unfeeling, no man would ever dare marry her in the future." I dropped my arms and stepped closer, closing the distance between us. I leaned in toward her ear, my voice dropping to a whisper that was for her alone. "Then what would people say about someone who failed the exam, but still schemes to steal someone else's admission letter?" She flinched as if struck. I wasn't finished. "And what about a woman," I continued, my voice dropping even lower, "who not only failed the exam, but is also pregnant with another man's child?" I leaned back slightly, meeting her horrified gaze. "Tell me, Clara, what would people say about her? That she's carrying his baby yet still dreaming of abandoning him to chase college? What do you think the villagers will say then?" Her face was on the verge of complete collapse, her composure shattered, her eyes wide with panic. What are you saying? I don't understand." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother returning. And she wasn't alone. Dr. Wong, the village physician, was with her, along with a handful of neighbors who just happened to be passing by. The audience was assembling. I stepped back, straightened up, and said in a voice loud enough to carry, "Since you're carrying Daniel's child, you'd better stay home and take care of your pregnancy. Daniel is your man. Don't try to shove him onto me. Daniel and I are just friends who grew up together." "We are not," Clara protested, her voice shrill. My gaze dropped pointedly to her still flat belly. "Daniel really is something else. How could he let a pregnant woman come out like this? You'd better go back to the school dorm and rest. If anything happens at my doorstep, how will I explain it to my good friend Daniel?" The color drained from Clara's face, leaving her deathly pale. The small crowd was now listening with rapt attention. She hurried forward, trying to cover my mouth. "Don't say nonsense. I'm not pregnant." At that moment, my mother rushed over, breathless. "Pregnant? She's pregnant, we need to be careful." If something happens right at our gate, how will I answer to Daniel? That boy was raised under my eyes. She turned to the doctor. Dr. Wong, hurry, check teacher Clara's pulse. I grabbed Clara's wrist. She struggled, but I held firm, placing her hand in front of the elderly doctor. Dr. Wong, a friend of my father's, took her wrist with a professional air. Clara tried to pull away, but when the doctor spoke in a stern, no-nonsense tone, she went still, her body trembling. The seconds stretched out. The neighbors were whispering, their eyes wide. After a short while, Dr. Wong released her hand and smiled at my mother. She's fine. Don't worry. Teacher Clara's pregnancy looks stable. The dam broke. A wave of chatter erupted from the crowd. Teacher Clara is pregnant? Oh my heavens, and she's not even married. Who's the father? That child is Daniel's. Didn't you hear? My mother immediately cut in, her voice firm. You're all mistaken. Our Sarah and Daniel are just very good friends. Nothing more. Don't say such things, it'll ruin my daughter's reputation. She looked pointedly at the stunned Clara. Daniel already has someone, even a child. All eyes turned back to Clara. Her secret, her shame, was dragged out into the harsh sunlight for all to see. A cold sweat broke out on her brow. She looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. I stepped forward and took her arm, my voice dripping with false concern. Everyone, please give her some space. She needs fresh air. This really isn't teacher Clara's fault. If anyone's to blame, it's Daniel. Even though he's my friend, I'll still say it. Why should teacher Clara, a woman, take all the blame? Someone in the crowd muttered, but college students talk differently. So that's not right. If teacher Clara didn't cooperate with Daniel, how would he have known what to do? My mother immediately covered my ears. Enough. Our Sarah is still young. Don't say such things in front of my daughter. She then addressed the crowd. Teacher Clara is here with no family. Who will go fetch Daniel? I don't like how teacher Clara looks. If anything happens, we can't bear the responsibility. Someone had already run off. Soon a man's voice called out from a distance. Daniel, where are you hiding? Go check on your wife. He appeared, being dragged by the arm toward the growing commotion at my gate. The crowd erupted again. Daniel, you little rascal. You even handled teacher Clara. She's a city girl. You're basically a city son-in-law now. You even have a child. When's the wedding? Daniel stood in the center of the storm, utterly flustered, his face pale. I stepped forward and confronted him, playing my part to perfection. Daniel, you're a grown man. You were hiding over there while you let your wife take all this on herself. I gasped dramatically, then grabbed Clara's arm. Teacher Clara, were you forced? Before anyone could answer, I lashed out and slapped Daniel hard for the second time in this new life. How could you do such a thing? Rape is punishable by death. Daniel, panicked and cornered, immediately shouted back. He seized Clara and yanked her to his side. Quick, say it. It was consensual. Say I didn't force you. It was the final, cruelest cut. I knew that feeling all too well from my first life. The feeling of being stripped of dignity, of being offered up as a sacrifice to save someone else's skin. Clara looked at Daniel, her eyes filled with a betrayal so profound it seemed to swallow her whole. Tears welled up and spilled over. She shoved him away from her with a surprising strength, then turned and ran, her figure steeped in shame, growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared from sight. I gave a cold laugh, turning to the stunned Daniel. Your wife just ran off. Aren't you going after her? He's carrying a baby, you know. Maybe show a little concern. He shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred before pushing through the crowd and chasing after her. The onlookers slowly dispersed, and with them the news began to spread like wildfire through the village. Daniel and the city teacher Clara were expecting a child before marriage. The first strands of my web were firmly in place. Their perfect secret love was a public scandal. And I was just getting started. The news spread through the village like a grass fire in a dry field. By evening you couldn't walk to the well without hearing the whispers. Daniel and the city girl. Pregnant. And she's a teacher. What a disgrace. I kept my head high, a picture of wounded dignity, the wronged friend who had almost been saddled with an unfaithful man. The next evening my father came home from his work at the grain depot, his face alight with a grim sort of excitement. You'll never believe it, he said, dropping his satchel by the door. That Daniel kid nearly got beaten to death by teacher Clara's father. My mother put down her sewing. What? When? Just now. Over at the Daniels' house. Don't you two want to go watch the commotion? My dad had been furious when I told him about Daniel's demand for my admission letter. If my mother and I hadn't held him back, he would have confronted Daniel's family that very night. Now he was savoring the schadenfreude. I set down my book at once. My mother, after a moment's hesitation, put her sewing aside. Together we followed my dad out into the twilight. The Daniel family's house wasn't far. We didn't even need to get close. A huge crowd was already gathered in the lane outside their compound. I squeezed my way through, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold, sharp anticipation. There in the dusty yard was the scene I had hoped for. Daniel was pinned to the ground by a well-dressed middle-aged man, Mr. Luo, Clara's father. His face was a mess of bruises and cuts, swollen and bleeding. A few burly men I didn't recognize had Daniel's father restrained. The old man could only curse and shout impotently at his son. Clara was on her knees in front of her father, sobbing. "Dad, stop hitting him. If you kill him, what about the baby in my belly?" Her father released Daniel at once, stood up, and with a look of utter contempt, slapped his own daughter hard across the face. "And you still have the nerve to beg for him? You disgraceful thing. How did I raise you? You've thrown away all the Luo family's honor." Eventually, the village cadres and the director of the Women's Federation showed up, their faces stern. The matter was settled with brutal, rural efficiency. There would be a marriage. Immediately. There was no other way to salvage even a shred of face for anyone involved. Before leaving, Mr. Luo spat on the ground, his words aimed like daggers at his daughter. "Stay here in this wretched countryside with that poor bumpkin. I don't have a daughter like you anymore." The Daniel family, however, seemed almost pleased once the shock wore off. They'd secured a city daughter-in-law after all. Daniel's mother, a woman with a sharp tongue and a sense of superiority as fragile as glass, started bragging the very next day. "I never agreed to let Sarah marry into our family anyway," she announced to a group of women by the well. "It was all of you pushing and pushing. My son's looks? City girls adore him. Who does that country bumpkin Sarah think she is?" Someone reminded her, "But your son just got beaten until his face swelled." She sniffed. "And yet the Luo's daughter is marrying into our family, isn't she? Truth is, even if Clara is from the city, we didn't think she was good enough. But since she's pregnant, what can we do? Hopefully she gives me a grandson. If it's just a girl, I don't want her. Can't afford to raise a money loser." Her voice carried loud and clear all the way to our yard. "And don't talk to me about her being from the city. My Daniel will get into college next year for sure. She only finished high school. How could she be worthy of him? The difference is obvious. My son is a man. So much more valuable." I listened from our gateway, a faint smile on my lips. In my past life, this same woman had blamed me for years for stealing the place of her supposed true daughter-in-law, Clara. Now these two forces of nature, Clara's city-bred entitlement and my mother-in-law's rural avarice, were locked together. I could only wish them a long and miserable life in each other's company. Soon, the Daniel household was a flurry of activity, preparing for a hasty, shame-tinged wedding. The day they married was the very day I left for college. The contrast was stark. Their ceremony was a small, somber affair in a dusty yard, the guests whispering behind their hands. My departure was a celebration. My parents, beaming with pride, accompanied me to the train station, their simple luggage filled with homemade snacks for my journey. "Study hard, Sarah," my father said, his voice thick with emotion as he squeezed my shoulder. "But don't forget to eat and sleep. Be safe, my girl," my mother whispered, hugging me tightly, her eyes glistening. "Write to us every week." I held on to them, the ache of parting sharpened by the knowledge of the 50 years I had lost with them. "I will. I promise. And one day I'll bring you both to live with me in the city. We'll never be separated again." The train whistle blew, a sound of liberation. As the carriage pulled away from the station, I saw my parents waving, their figures growing smaller until they were swallowed by the horizon. I wasn't just leaving the village, I was leaving the ghost of my old life behind. University was a revelation. The campus was vast and green, the libraries were temples of quiet knowledge, and the lecture halls buzzed with intellectual energy. In my past life I should have been here. In this one I cherished every single day. I attended every lecture, filled notebooks with meticulous script, and spent my evenings in the library, the quiet hum of concentration a balm to my soul. It wasn't just about studying. I joined the debate club, surprising myself with my own ferocity. I made friends, real friends like Ming, a sharp-witted girl from a coastal city who became my closest confidant and business partner. We started small, buying popsicles wholesale and selling them at construction sites to earn pocket money and tuition, determined not to burden our families. When I went home for winter break, the village felt smaller. I arrived at the station to find my parents waiting, their faces creased with happy smiles. As we walked home I saw her. Clara. She was standing in the yard of the Daniel house, her belly large and round under a thick padded jacket. When she saw me, her expression twisted into something pure and venomous, a look of utter resentment. My mother followed my gaze and sighed softly. What a waste of such a good girl tied to that family. I didn't say anything. I just looked at Clara, at the life she had chosen and the one she had stolen from me. She no longer looked like the elegant city girl. Her hair was lank, her skin pale. The village had already begun to wear her down. Before I could look away, Daniel's mother came out, her voice shrill. Clara, what are you standing there for? What time is it and you still haven't started dinner? When she saw my parents and me, her face underwent a miraculous transformation. She bustled out with a wide, false smile. Sarah, you're back. Our college girl is back. Her eyes raked over my new city-bought coat and trousers. College really changes a person, doesn't it? Her bearing is different. She seems even more beautiful now that she's in university. My mother made polite non-committal noises and quickly steered me away. You must be tired from the trip. Come home and rest. That evening, as we sat by the stove, my mother filled me in on the gossip. At first, Daniel treated her well, but once he realized her family truly had disowned her, he changed. She shook her head. Without a family to back you up, it's impossible. The school expelled her, for getting pregnant before marriage. Said she led students astray. She hesitated, then asked the question that had probably been burning in her mind. Sarah, do you still have feelings for Daniel? Of course not, Ma, I said, my voice firm and clear. Not at all. The relief on her face was palpable. Good. That's good. She continued, and another reason Daniel turned cold, he can't take the college entrance exam next year. The officials said an out-of-wedlock pregnancy shows a lack of moral character. They banned him for 3 years. I wasn't surprised. A small, cold part of me was satisfied. His path, the one he had tried to steal for Clara, was now irrevocably closed to him. Later that night there was a knock at our door. It was Daniel holding a plate of dumplings. My mother sent these, he said, his eyes finding me in the dim light of the main room. When he saw me, his face brightened slightly. Sarah, we've only been apart a few months. You really have changed a lot. My mother, ever polite, agreed. She really has become prettier. I looked at him coldly. Do you need something? His expression flickered with awkwardness, but he recovered, lifting his chin with a shadow of his old arrogance. Nothing much. I just came to see you. You're a college student now. I guess university teaches you to dress up, huh? Not that impressive, I said with a derisive smile. If you've got spare breath for nonsense, go home and take care of your wife. Don't just notice that I've changed without seeing that your wife has changed too. I paused, letting the words sink in. If you treat a person like a flower, you'll nurture it. If you treat them like weeds, you'll nearly kill it. I'm fine with Clara, he said stubbornly, ducking his head. My father, who had been silent in his chair, let out a loud, dismissive snort. That kid's ruined. And I even named him. My father had chosen Daniel's given name, a mark of affection he now clearly regretted. I felt nothing for him. No pity, no anger, just a vast and empty indifference. He was already a stranger, a character in a play whose tragic final act I had already seen. I was just waiting for the curtain to fall. The new year came and went in a blur of firecrackers and family meals. I saw Daniel and Clara occasionally, putting on a show of domesticity for the neighbors. They looked like a picture of misery pretending to be happy. I secretly wished they'd tie the knot tighter and throw away the key. A few days after the Lantern Festival, I returned to school, the village and its dramas fading behind me like a distant dream. My life was at university now. Ming and I, along with a few other ambitious classmates, had moved beyond popsicles. We started a small tutoring service, helping high school students prepare for their exams. The work was rewarding, and the money we saved was our seed capital for bigger dreams. The next time I went home in the early summer, the news was waiting for me. Clara had given birth. A baby girl. Daniel's parents were furious. A girl was a losing investment, a money loser, who would eventually marry into another family. They issued an ultimatum: either Clara try immediately for a son, or Daniel must divorce her because they wouldn't waste resources on a granddaughter. The tension in their household must have been unbearable. One afternoon I saw them by the river, their voices carrying on the still air. They were arguing, their postures rigid with anger. "Are you deaf or mute?" Clara snapped, her voice sharp and shrill. It was a far cry from the cultured tones she'd once affected. "Your parents talk about me like that and you don't even make a sound?" Daniel answered in a low, resentful mumble I couldn't quite hear. Suddenly his voice rose, laced with a contempt I knew all too well. "Why do you have to be so crude now? College kids aren't crude. How could you possibly be worthy? You won't even allow me to take the college exam, yet you act all refined here." It was a breathtaking rewriting of history. He was blaming her for his own failures. He raised his hand. Clara leaned in as if daring him. "You really think my parents don't want me anymore? Go ahead. Try hitting me once and see how they deal with you. I'll divorce you right now. Once I go back home I'll still be myself and you're nothing. A man like you isn't even fit to carry my shoes." She jabbed a finger at his nose. "I don't want to stay in your house anymore. Go tell your parents you're going to the city to work. I'm done here." The Daniel household erupted into chaos again. But Daniel, under Clara's pressure and with no future in the village, finally capitulated. They packed their meager belongings, took their infant daughter and left for the provincial capital. Once they were gone, Daniel's parents immediately changed their tune, boasting to anyone who would listen. "The city has more opportunities. Even if you're not a college graduate, you can still make good money there. Our Daniel is ambitious." I only smiled faintly and let their words wash over me. Their delusions were no longer my concern. A little over a month after my return to university, Ming and I were at a construction site on the outskirts of the city, negotiating a bulk sale of cigarettes and soda to the foreman. The air was thick with dust and the cacophony of hammers and shouting men. And that's when I saw him. Daniel. He was hauling bricks, his back bent under the weight, his clothes stained with sweat and dirt. The moment he saw me, he froze, his face a mask of pure embarrassment. But then his eyes fell on the box of goods I was carrying and his expression shifted. He puffed himself up, a pathetic attempt to regain some dignity. "I thought you were at college," he said, a sneer in his voice. "Turns out you're just here peddling goods." One of my classmates, a boy named Lei, looked at me in confusion. "Sarah, you know him?" Daniel didn't even let me answer. "She's a college student? Looks the same as us to me." He waved his workmates over. "See this? A college student. In the end, no different from us. Honestly, going to college is useless. We're better off. They'll waste 4 years before they can make money, but we're already earning." The other workers, a rough and tired-looking group, laughed and cheered him on. Lei bristled, his face flushing. "How can you talk like that?" I put a hand on his arm to calm him. With a serene smile, I said to Daniel, "Your way of thinking is pretty advanced. Skipping a few years of detours straight to hard labor." He completely missed the sarcasm. Straightening his back proudly, he said, "Exactly. At least I'm earning more than you right now. So just keep studying your books but don't turn into some useless bookworm." Lei was practically vibrating with anger. "You." I stopped him again. "No need to bother. Let's go." As we walked away, I stored the encounter away. Daniel was living and working near my university. The city, it seemed, was not so large after all. Then one weekend I ran into Clara. And what I saw shocked me. Ming and I were window shopping in a bustling commercial street when a friend nudged me. "Wow, look at her. I'm jealous. That gold necklace is beautiful. And the earrings too." I followed her gaze. It was Clara. But she was transformed. She had regained that city elegance, even more polished than before. Her hair was freshly permed into the latest style, she wore a well-tailored dress and her body glittered with gold jewelry. She looked every inch the wealthy wife she had always pretended to be. She saw me and walked over, a condescending smile on her lips. What a coincidence running into you here. Her eyes swept over my simple student's clothes. I heard you've been doing work study. Getting into college is fine, but if you can't afford to finish, that'll be a real joke. She let out a tinkling laugh. Honestly, you should have waited a few years, saved up money first and then taken the exam. I pulled a faint smile and said to Ming, "This is the wife of that villager we ran into at the construction site the other day." Ming, catching on immediately, grinned. Ah, no wonder her tone sounded so familiar. Comes from sharing the same bed. I teased back, "Don't say that. Her husband dotes on her. He's breaking his back hauling bricks at the construction site just to buy her all that gold." Clara's smile vanished. "You don't know a thing," she sneered, rolling her eyes. "Daniel isn't working at the construction site anymore. We plan to run a business ourselves." She sniffed with pride. "Opportunities are everywhere now. Studying is the most useless thing." I laughed out loud. "It sounds like you two really are a perfect match. The same bed, the same words, the same attitude." I turned to my friends. The theory that studying is useless really only applies to people like them, which is why they got pregnant before marriage and can't even go to college. Lei, who was with us, shouted out of wedlock pregnancy, loudly enough to draw the attention of passers-by. Clara's face turned a mottled red. She yanked on my sleeve as my friends pulled me away, whispering, "Don't talk to people like that. It's embarrassing." I glanced back and caught her utterly resentful look. Passers-by were staring at her, whispering. Humiliated, she lowered her head, covered her face with her hand and hurried off in the opposite direction. I stored that image away too. The glittering jewelry, the proud boasts about a business. It didn't add up. A construction worker's wages couldn't afford that. A cold suspicion began to form in the back of my mind. The city offered many opportunities, but not all of them were honest. And Clara, it seemed, was tired of waiting for Daniel to provide the life she felt she deserved. Half a month after the encounter with Clara, I phoned my parents from the public booth near the university. My mother's voice, crackling down the line, was full of village gossip. "And that Daniel," she said, her tone a mix of scorn and pity. "His parents are telling everyone he's started some big business in the city. Buying and selling, they say. Making a fortune." I hummed non-committally, staring out at the bustling campus street. I wasn't interested in their fabrications. For me, the most important things were my studies and the small company Ming and I were building. We had moved from tutoring to importing electronic components, calculators, digital watches, small luxuries that were in high demand. The profits were reinvested, growing steadily. Our future was a tangible thing, built line by line on a balance sheet, not on boasts in a dusty village square. After that, I didn't run into Daniel again. His pride, I assumed, would keep him far from any place he might see me. But I saw Clara several more times. Each time she was a vision of sumptuous finery, a walking advertisement for a wealth I knew Daniel couldn't possibly have generated. Sometimes she had her little girl in tow. The child, whom they had named Maggie, was already a year old, not much smaller than when Daniel had first paraded her in front of me in my last life, claiming she was an orphan. The sight of that child was a cold knife twisting in a wound I thought had cauterized. Whenever I remembered that in my past life I had given her a kidney, loved her as my own, only to be betrayed so utterly, the hatred welled up again, fresh and sharp. This time the little girl would sometimes look at me, her eyes wide and innocent, and cling to her mother's leg as if wanting me to pick her up. I always stepped back, a superstitious chill running down my spine. She was bad luck, a living reminder of a stolen life. I didn't need to ask Clara for details. She blurted them out on her own, a need to assert her perceived superiority. "I don't have to do anything now," she preened one day, adjusting the strap of her expensive-looking handbag. We were in a park. I was reading, she was, it seemed, simply promenading. "Daniel told me to stay home and be the young mistress. I was born to enjoy life." She glanced down at Maggie, who was toddling unsteadily on the grass. "My daughter is mine, of course. She's meant to have a good life." I couldn't help the cold, mirthless laugh that escaped me. I imagined this child years from now, her kidneys failing just as they had in the previous timeline. "Truly a life of comfort," I said, my voice flat. Clara took my laugh as mockery. Her face tightened, anger and shame warring in her eyes. What are you laughing at? Don't think you're great just because you got into college. I'll tell you, if I marry a good husband, I'm better than you. I gave a forced, dismissive chuckle. Whatever makes you happy. I gathered my books and stood to leave. Behind me, I heard Maggie suddenly start to cry. Clara snapped at her. Stop crying. You always cry all the time. The sound followed me. In my last life, that mother and daughter had met in secret, their bond seemingly precious and profound. In this life, bound together by necessity and public shame, it didn't look particularly affectionate. It looked strained, a burden for Clara and a source of confusion for the child. School and my growing business kept me busy, leaving less and less time to dwell on them. They were becoming a footnote, a minor nuisance in the grand narrative of my new life. The next time I heard news about them was when I went home for summer break. The moment I stepped through the door, my mother pulled me aside, her face serious. Sarah, isn't Daniel living pretty close to your university? She asked, her voice low. I suppose so, I said, unpacking my bag. Be careful, she pressed, her hand on my arm. If he asks you for money, don't be soft-hearted. Don't give him a single cent. That made me stop and look at her. Why would he borrow money from me? My mother sighed, a trace of genuine sympathy in her eyes, though not for Daniel. He lost a lot in his business. Thousands, they say. Some speculative venture. Now he's borrowing everywhere. His parents are borrowing too, mortgaging their pig pens. Everyone who lent them money initially is now keeping their distance. Your uncle and aunt curse his name at home every day. How did it turn out like this? I patted my mother's back, a strange sense of calm settling over me. This was the inevitable crash. The gilded cage Clara had built was made of fool's gold. Don't worry, Ma, I said firmly. I'll be fine. I'm not that naive girl anymore. I didn't stay home long. Ming and I had secured summer jobs as servers at the city's largest hotel, wanting to learn about management and customer service from the ground up. The hotel was a world of polished marble and hushed voices, a stark contrast to the dusty construction sites of our earlier work-study days. One afternoon, we answered a room service call to one of the more expensive suites. The tray was heavy with expensive liquor and delicate pastries. I balanced it carefully, knocking on the ornate door. It was opened by a greasy, beer-bellied man in a silk robe. The room reeked of cigar smoke and cheap perfume. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed with her top half bare, was Clara. She was straddling the knee of another, older man, her face flushed. Seeing me, she sprang up as if electrocuted, scrambling to cover herself, her eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated panic. What are you doing here? She stammered. The greasy man turned, his eyes narrowing. Do you know them? He demanded of Clara. We don't, I said quickly, my voice professionally neutral. I kept my eyes downcast, focusing on placing the tray on the table, my hands steady despite the roaring in my ears. The mess of discarded clothes and empty bottles was disgusting, but the human mess was far worse. Afterwards, as Ming and I walked back to the staff area, Clara found me in the hallway. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. Her face was pale, her carefully applied makeup smudged. Sarah, she hissed, her voice trembling with fear and fury. If you dare tell Daniel about this, I won't let it end well for you. I shook her hand off, meeting her panicked gaze with a cold, level stare. So, this is how you beg people? Her face trembled. She took a deep breath, trying to muster her old arrogance. That man, he's not someone you can mess with. If you try to scheme against me, I'll have him kill you. Having delivered her pathetic threat, she turned and hurried away, presumably thinking she had scared me into silence. But I wasn't scared. I was calculating. I knew who that greasy man was. In my past life, I'd seen his name in the papers. A minor hanger-on to a wealthy family, known for his shady deals and lecherous behavior. Later, when the family threw him out, it had been a minor scandal. I didn't dare provoke him directly, but I knew his weakness, his wife. The next day, on my day off, I put on my most presentable clothes and went to the address I had looked up for the wife of the greasy man, a Mrs. Yao. She was a stern-looking woman who lived in a large, traditional compound. At first, she didn't believe me. Perhaps out of pride, she denied it vehemently, calling me a troublemaker. But I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. I simply said, check the hotel records for room 408. Have someone watch him. You'll find your proof. I left it at that. A few days later, the city was buzzing with a salacious piece of news. It never made the official papers, but it spread through the university and the markets like wildfire. Mrs. Yao, armed with proof from a private investigator, had struck. She had found her husband and Clara in a different hotel room. The wronged wife hadn't even let Clara put her clothes on. She had dragged her out into the street and had her lackeys beat her almost to death in front of a gawking crowd. The greasy man got an even worse fate. Not only was he thrown out by the wealthy family, he ended up dead a week later, rumors said, at the hands of the underworld. Our journalism students, who had been hunting for a story, stumbled onto the scene. They didn't dare publish it, but I managed to get the photos from them for a small fee. They were brutal, graphic evidence of Clara's utter humiliation and destruction. I held the grainy black and white photos in my hand. They showed Clara, naked and bruised, being dragged by her hair, her face a mask of terror and shame. There was no satisfaction in it, only a cold, grim finality. This was the bed she had made. I knew where their shabby rented room was. One evening I walked past and heard the sounds of a struggle from within. Debt collectors, their voices rough, were camped out inside. Through the grimy window I saw one of them grab Clara, who was trying to shield Maggie. She struggled, begging Daniel for help. But Daniel just sat in a corner, his head in his hands, and pretended not to see. He had closed his eyes to her betrayal, just as he had closed his eyes to my pain in another life. Once the men left, laughing coarsely, Clara regained a flicker of her old fire. She lunged at Daniel, beating his back and shoulders with her fists. Are you even a man? You just stand there and watch your wife be bullied by those people? It's all because of you. Your failures. Daniel finally shoved her away, his face contorted with a rage born of impotence. If you hadn't forced me into business, if you hadn't been so greedy, I wouldn't have ended up like this. This is your fault. Their child Maggie cried in a corner, ignored by both. The shabby rented room was a pit of despair. I didn't need to see any more. I slipped the envelope of photos under their door and walked away into the night. The final act was theirs to play. The news reached me the next morning through the university gossip mill, now inextricably linked with the sordid tale. Clara had been beaten by Daniel and was in the hospital with serious injuries. Daniel had been taken into custody by the police. I went to the hospital. It wasn't out of concern but out of a need for confirmation, for closure. The doctor, a weary-looking man in a white coat, was blunt. She's sustained significant head trauma. She hasn't regained consciousness. It's likely she'll remain in a persistent vegetative state. A vegetable. The word was cold, clinical, and utterly final. The elegant city teacher, the woman for whom Daniel had betrayed me, was now reduced to this. A body kept alive by machines, her mind gone. At the police station, Daniel, looking haggard and aged beyond his years, applied to see me. A part of me was curious. What could he possibly have left to say? The moment I entered the visiting room, he dropped to his knees, the sound of his bones hitting the concrete floor echoing in the sterile space. He was crying, great, heaving sobs that racked his thin frame. Sarah. Wife. I'm sorry, he wailed, his voice raw. I remember now. I remember everything. Our life together, our daughter. Give me one more chance, please. Let's go back to the past like before and live well together. Astonishingly, he had awakened. The shock, the violence had broken through whatever wall had separated him from the memories of our first life. He was remembering the 50 years of marriage, the life I had lived as his dupe. I took a step back, my hands clenched at my sides. The sight of him on his knees, begging, stirred no pity in me. It was too late. A lifetime too late. Daniel, I said, my voice cold and steady, cutting through his tears. You still think I want to live with you? Who gave you that confidence? I let the question hang in the air, watching his hope crumble. You mean nothing to me now. And your wife has been beaten into a vegetative state. You should just serve your time quietly in prison and stop imagining nonsense. He knelt there, the tears of remorse streaming down his face. How did it come to this? He whispered, more to himself than to me. Why did I give up everything I once had? Our home. He crawled toward me on his knees, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Sarah, please do one thing for me. Just one thing. Take care of little Maggie, please. She grew up by your side in the past life. She's your daughter too, in a way. You loved her once. A cruel, unbidden smile curved my lips. A child without parents is just an orphan, I said, my tone devoid of all warmth. Send her to an orphanage. Daniel, don't look for me anymore. I have to continue my studies. I turned and walked toward the door, my steps firm and decisive. Why won't you give me one more chance? His voice rose to a frantic shout behind me. Weren't we good before? Weren't we happy? His voice faded as the heavy door swung shut between us, locking him away in his well-deserved prison. I left him there in the past where he belonged. Half a year later, Daniel's case was concluded. Assault causing grievous bodily harm. 13 years in prison. Clara remained in the hospital, a fiscal and moral black hole. I never went back to see her and didn't know what became of her later. I didn't care to know. I threw myself into my studies and my business. Ming and I, armed with our degrees and a decade of grinding work, officially started our company. We focused on electronics manufacturing, a field ripe with opportunity. My memories of the future, though fuzzy on specifics, gave me an instinct for promising trends. We invested wisely, worked tirelessly, and built something real. 10 years after graduating from college, our company went public. The day of the IPO, I stood on a balcony overlooking the city, a glass of champagne in my hand. The lights of the city twinkled below, a galaxy of possibilities I had seized for myself. I had already brought my parents to live with me in a spacious, sun-filled apartment. The three of us were truly, deeply happy. I cherished every day I had with them, a second chance I would never take for granted. 3 more years passed in the blink of an eye. My parents were content, my company was thriving, and my life was my own. One evening, just after I left the office, a thin, desperate figure lunged from the shadows of the building's entrance and dropped to her knees in front of me, clutching at the hem of my coat. Mom. I looked down, dazed for a moment. The girl was in her late teens, but she looked haggard and ill. Her eyes were sunken, her skin had a yellowish, unhealthy tint. Mom, it's me, Maggie, she sobbed, her voice cracking. You won't forget me, will you? You were so good to me in the last life. You even gave me a kidney. You can't forget me, can you? The shock was like a physical blow. She too had awakened. And following that past timeline, it meant her kidneys were failing. No. Mom, only you can save me now, she pleaded, her tears falling on the polished marble steps. If you don't give me a kidney, I won't live long. I'll die. I waved a hand and 2 security guards rushed over, pulling the sobbing girl to her feet. Maggie, I said, my voice calm and final. I'm not your mother. Clara's your mother. Now that I'm not standing between you two, you don't have to meet your real mom in secret anymore. You should be glad. She stared at me, stunned into momentary silence. How do you know that? She whispered. Weren't you dead when we? I curled a cold smile. Go find your real mom. Even if she's in a vegetative state, she could still be tissue typed. And your father? He's supposed to be getting out of prison soon, right? Go ask him for a match. Maggie struggled in the guard's grip, her desperation turning to hysteria. Mom, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Don't abandon me. From now on, I'll only accept you as my mother. I'll never go see Daniel and Clara again, I promise. Please, give me one more chance so I can repay you, so I can be filial. In my last life, I had given her a kidney and she had never repaid that kindness, only betrayal. Now, all these years later, she was still after my organs, seeing me not as a person, but as a resource to be harvested. Maggie, I said, my voice cutting through her cries. I don't have a daughter like you. Don't come looking for me again. I nodded to the guards. Throw her out. And make sure she's banned from the premises. As they dragged her away, she screamed, her voice echoing in the plaza. Mom. Don't abandon me. Please save me. I got into my waiting car and shut the door. The soundproofing was excellent. At last I couldn't hear her calls anymore. That ungrateful ingrate, the living symbol of my greatest betrayal, could disappear from my life forever. I felt a profound, unshakable peace. The final thread was cut. The peace that settled over me after banishing Maggie was profound, but it was short-lived. A few days later, the social news section of the local paper, which I skimmed out of habit more than interest, delivered the final, shocking chapter. The headline was stark. Paroled father murdered by estranged daughter in organ transplant dispute. My breath caught. I read on, a cold, detached feeling settling in my bones. The article detailed how Daniel had been released on parole for good behavior. Maggie, who had been tracking his release, was there to meet him. She didn't welcome him home. She demanded he get a tissue typing test for a kidney transplant. The test of course failed. Desperate and with her health rapidly declining, Maggie then demanded Daniel use his parolee's meager funds to buy her a kidney on the black market. He had no money, no prospects, nothing to offer but his own broken body, which she had already rejected. According to a witness, Maggie completely broke down. The article quoted her rant, a chilling echo of the past. "If you hadn't married Clara, my real mother would never have rejected me. I'd be back with her now. She doesn't recognize me anymore because of you. If I have no kidney, I'll die and you won't live either." In a frenzy of misplaced blame and primal survival instinct, she had produced a knife and stabbed him. The article noted that Daniel, despite years of hard labor in prison keeping him physically strong, seemed to offer little resistance. Perhaps he was too shocked, too broken, or perhaps some deep, buried part of him saw this as his ultimate penance. He collapsed in a pool of blood and died on the spot. Before the police arrived, Maggie, covered in her father's blood, tried to turn the knife on herself but lost her nerve. She was arrested and her body too weak to withstand both her disease and the stress of incarceration, died in prison a month later, never receiving the transplant she so desperately sought. As for Clara, the article had a single final line. The child's mother, Clara Luo, had been in a persistent vegetative state for years and passed away quietly in a state care facility last year, predeceasing the incident. I put the paper down. The three of them were gone. Daniel, Clara, Maggie. The twisted triangle that had defined and destroyed my first life was now just a sordid news story, soon to be forgotten by everyone but me. Although I had long since let go of my active hatred for them, the news brought an immense, almost physical lightness. It was over. Truly over. The last ghost of that terrible life was laid to rest. I felt no joy, only a quiet, solemn finality. The universe, or fate, or whatever force had granted me the second chance, had allowed their own choices to lead them to their inevitable tragic end. I had been merely a spectator in this final act. That evening I stood on the balcony of my high-rise apartment, looking out at the glittering city. My parents were inside watching a television drama, their soft laughter a comforting sound. My company was thriving. I had friends, respect, and a life built on my own terms. Maybe one day I thought I would build my own family. The wounds of the past were scars now, strong but no longer painful. I wouldn't retreat from life because of them. But before that I wanted to savor this. The quiet, the success, the simple joy of a life lived for myself. With my parents and my best friends by my side I was happy. Truly, deeply and unequivocally happy. 5 years later I married Leo, a quiet, kind-hearted man I met through Ming. He was an architect, a man who built beautiful, lasting things with patience and care. He knew fragments of my past, the broad strokes of a difficult first love and loss, but he never pressed for details. He loved me for the woman I was now, driven, successful and finally open to being cherished. We had a small, elegant wedding. My father, his hair now completely white, beamed as he walked me down the aisle. My mother cried happy tears throughout the entire ceremony. Ming was my maid of honor. There was no shadow from the past, no ghost at the feast. It was a celebration purely of the future. A year after that my daughter was born. We named her Xiao, meaning elegant and graceful. Holding her in my arms for the first time, feeling the weight of her tiny, trusting body, was a healing balm I hadn't known I needed. This was my child. My flesh and blood. The love I felt for her was fierce, pure and untainted by any history of betrayal. I would protect her, I would guide her, and I would teach her to build her own life, to never sacrifice her dreams for anyone. One sunny afternoon we were all at the park. Leo, myself, Xiao, now a toddling 2-year-old, and my parents who doted on their granddaughter. We spread a blanket on the grass. Xiao giggled as she chased bubbles Leo blew for her, her little legs pumping with unsteady joy. My mother laughed, clapping her hands, while my father watched with a contented smile, his arm around my mother's shoulders. I looked at them, at this perfect, peaceful tableau of my life. The memory of that other life, the stifling village, the bitter marriage, the ungrateful daughter, the lonely death, felt like a story I had read long ago, a tragic tale belonging to someone else. The path here had been paved with hardship, shrewd choices, and the cold fire of revenge that had long since burned out, leaving only warm ashes of contentment. I had taken back everything that was stolen from me and built upon it a legacy that was entirely my own. Leo came and sat beside me, slipping his hand into mine. "A penny for your thoughts," he said softly. I leaned my head on his shoulder, watching our daughter tumble onto the soft grass, only to get up again, laughing. I thought of the long, twisted road that had led me to this moment. The betrayal, the rebirth, the struggle, the victory. "I was just thinking," I said, my voice filled with a quiet certainty, "that everything is exactly as it should be. The past was a closed book. The future was this warmth, this love, this unshakable peace. I had not just been reborn, I had been remade. And this time my life was my own masterpiece." The end.